Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had a zero gravity but better than Ochaco Uraraka. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. Gravity is not merely a force. It is the law. It is the invisible chain that binds the stars to the void, the moon to the earth, and the feet of men to the pavement. It is absolute. It is constant. It is unforgiving. For 4-year-old Ochaco Uraraka, the world was defined by these absolutes. The sky was blue, the grass was green, and Katsuki Bakugo was the strongest boy in the neighborhood. These were facts, immutable and heavy, pressing down on his small shoulders like the atmosphere itself. The afternoon sun beat down on the small park in Muzurifu, casting long, sharp shadows across the sandbox. The air smelled of heated rubber and dry earth. Near the cluster of trees that lined the perimeter, a sobbing child lay curled in the dirt, clutching a bruised knee. Standing over him, palms popping with small, violent bursts of nitroglycerin, was Katsuki. "You think you can just ignore me?" Katsuki growled, his red eyes narrowing. A small explosion cracked against his palm, sending a puff of acrid smoke into the summer air. "When I talk, you listen extra." Izuku stood between them. His knees were shaking. They knocked together with a rhythm that matched the frantic pounding of his heart. He was terrified. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to fold, to submit to the hierarchy that Katsuki had established with fists and fire. But Izuku's feet remained planted. "Kaken, stop," Izuku said. His voice was thin, wavering like a reed in a storm, but it was there. He raised his trembling hands, guarding the boy behind him. "He's crying. You're being mean." Katsuki's expression shifted from irritation to a cold, predatory amusement. He took a step forward. "Mean? I'm just teaching him his place. And maybe I need to teach you yours, Deku. You're quirkless. You're nothing. You're lighter than air." Katsuki lunged. It was a telegraph move, a right hook led by a burst of sparks. Izuku flinched, squeezing his eyes shut. He waited for the pain. He waited for the heat. He waited for the inevitable impact that would knock him into the dust. He wished, with a desperate, singular focus, for the attack to stop. He wished for the pressure of the moment to just hold still. Stop. A sound resonated through the clearing. Not a bang, not a shout, but a deep, thrumming vroom, like a massive bass string plucked in an empty room. The heat didn't come. The impact didn't arrive. Slowly, Izuku opened one green eye. The world had gone strange. Dust motes that had been kicked up by Katsuki's charge were frozen in midair, suspended in a glittering haze. A fallen leaf, caught in a breeze, had stopped dead inches from Izuku's nose, vibrating slightly but refusing to move forward. And then there was Katsuki. The blonde boy was frozen mid-lunge, his fist extended. But he wasn't just stopped, he was pinned. His face was contorted in a mask of shock and pain. His feet were splayed wide, sinking deep into the compacted earth. It looked as though an invisible, colossal hand had pressed down upon him from the heavens, freezing his momentum and crushing him toward the planet's core. What? Katsuki wheezed. The word was heavy, dragged out of his throat with effort. "Can't move." Izuku stared at his own hands. They were glowing with a faint, violet aura, a strange mist that seemed to distort the light around his fingers. He could feel it. He didn't just feel the wind or the heat anymore. He felt the mass of everything. He felt the weight of the rocks, the density of the air, the gravitational pull of the earth beneath his sneakers. It was a sixth sense, a sudden expansion of awareness that was both intoxicating and terrifying. He looked at Katsuki. He could feel the boy's weight in his mind, represented by a mental thread. Izuku was pulling on that thread, anchoring it, intensifying it. "I said stop," Izuku whispered. The violet aura flared. Crack. The ground beneath Katsuki shattered. The dirt depressed 6 inches instantaneously, forming a perfect crater around the blonde boy. Katsuki slammed onto his stomach, pinned flat by a force he couldn't see or fight. The explosions in his palms fizzled out, choked by the sheer pressure pressing his hands into the dirt. "Izuku!" The voice of his mother broke the trance. Inko Midoriya was running from the park bench, her face pale. Izuku gasped, his concentration shattering. The violet light vanished. The heavy, oppressive hum in the air lifted instantly. Katsuki gasped, sucking in air as the invisible weight vanished, leaving him coughing in the dust. Izuku stumbled back, the world spinning violently. The horizon tilted 45 degrees to the left, then to the right. A wave of nausea, thick and sour, rolled up his throat. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his head. The world felt too light, then too heavy. His inner ear was screaming, sending conflicting signals to a brain that had just touched the fundamental forces of the universe. As his mother wrapped her arms around him, crying his name, Izuku looked over her shoulder at Katsuki. The blond boy was pushing himself up on shaking arms, dirt clinging to his face. He didn't look angry. He didn't look arrogant. For the first time in their lives, Katsuki Bakugo looked at Izuku Midoriya with fear. 10 years later, the diagnosis had been graviton. It was a mutation, the doctor had explained, a deviate evolution of his mother's mild telekinesis mixed with his father's fire-breathing, somehow resulting in the ability to manipulate the graviton particles within a specific field. It was a power that belonged in a comic book, a quirk capable of altering the fundamental laws of physics. But physics, Izuku learned, always demanded a trade. Aldera Junior High was a place of noise and mediocrity, a holding pen for teenagers waiting for their lives to begin. In the third-year classroom, the air was thick with the smell of chalk dust and hormonal aggression. Since you're all third years, it's time to think seriously about your future, the teacher droned, tapping a stack of papers against the podium. I would pass out these career aptitude forms, but, he smirked, throwing the papers into the air. I assume you all want to be heroes, the class erupted. Quirks flashed, elongated fingers, minor telekinesis, rocky skin. It was a display of individuality, a chaotic celebration of power. Yes, you have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, calming them down. But remember, public quirk use is against the law. Hey, teach! The voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. Katsuki Bakugo sat with his feet up on his desk, leaning back with an arrogance that bordered on royalty. Don't lump me in with these extras. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal, the class jeered, but Bakugo ignored them, a savage grin on his face. I'm going to the top. I'll surpass All Might and become the richest, most famous hero of all time. I've already aced the mock exams for UA High. Oh, that's right, the teacher mused. Bakugo is aiming for UA. Whispers broke out. UA was the summit, the impossible dream. And the teacher continued, glancing down at his clipboard, it seems Midoriya is also applying to UA. The room went dead silent. It wasn't the silence of mockery. It wasn't the silence that usually followed the declaration of a delusional dream. It was a heavy, uncomfortable silence. The air in the room seemed to thicken. Izuku sat near the back, his posture straight, his eyes focused on his notebook. He didn't look up. He felt the eyes on him, 30 pairs of them. Bakugo froze. His feet dropped from the desk with a heavy thud. He turned slowly in his seat to look at the boy with the messy green hair. Deku, Bakugo said. His voice was low, lacking its usual explosive volume. Izuku stopped writing. He slowly closed his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13, and looked up. His eyes were vibrant emerald, but there were dark circles underneath them, the sign of a boy who spent too many nights fighting off the vertigo that came with his training. Yes, Kaken? Izuku asked calmly. Bakugo stood up. The other students instinctively leaned away from him, but they also leaned away from Izuku. In this classroom, there were two monsters. One was loud, explosive, and volatile. The other was quiet, invisible, and terrifying. UA, Bakugo stated, walking toward Izuku's desk. You're actually doing it. You're going to try and stand on the same stage as me. It's the best hero school in the country, Izuku replied, his voice even. It's the only logical choice. Bakugo stopped in front of Izuku's desk. He placed a hand on the surface. Smoke began to curl from his palm. Physics won't save you, Deku. You think because you can make things float, you can look down on me? You think because you got a lucky mutation, you're better than me? I don't think I'm better than anyone, Izuku said, and he meant it. He knew the cost of his power. He knew that if he lost focus for a second, he could bring the roof down on their heads. He knew that if he pushed too hard, his brain would scramble his sense of direction so badly he wouldn't be able to stand for an hour. I just want to be a hero. Same as you. Don't lie. Bakugo roared, and he let off an explosion. Boom. The desk should have shattered. The force should have sent splinters flying into Izuku's face. But the smoke cleared, and the desk was intact. A centimeter above the wood, a thin, shimmering film of violet light acted as a barrier. The explosion had been contained, its force redirected upward into a harmless puff of heat. Izuku hadn't flinched. His eyes glowed with that faint, ethereal light. Sit down, Kaken, Izuku said softly. It wasn't a command, it was a suggestion. But as he spoke, the gravity in the immediate vicinity of Bakugo shifted. Just a fraction. Just enough to make Bakugo's shoulders feel like they were made of lead. Bakugo gritted his teeth, his knees buckling slightly before he forced them straight with sheer physical strength. He glared at Izuku, veins popping in his forehead. The rivalry between them wasn't the bullying dynamic of typical childhoods. Bakugo didn't beat Izuku up because getting close to Izuku was like walking into a trash compactor. Izuku didn't cower because he knew he could pin Bakugo to the ceiling with a thought. It was a cold war. Bakugo hated Izuku because Izuku was the only person who made him feel heavy. You're going to crash, Deku, Bakugo hissed, pulling his hand back. One day, you're going to push that freak brain of yours too hard, and you're going to splatter. And I'll be there to laugh. Bakugo turned and stormed back to his seat. Izuku let out a breath he had been holding. He released the gravitational hold. The violet light faded from his eyes, and immediately, the room spun. Izuku gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning white. He squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the floor to stop acting like the deck of a ship in a typhoon. Equilibrium check, he thought, running through the mental exercises Dr. Garaki had taught him. Up is up. Down is down. Gravity is constant. It took 10 seconds for the nausea to pass. When he opened his eyes, the class was looking at him with that familiar mix of awe and alienation. He wasn't one of them. He was a force of nature in a middle school uniform. School ended, and Izuku walked home alone. He avoided the main streets. Crowds were difficult. Too many variables. If he was bumped or startled, his quirk could flare. He had learned control over the years. Meticulous, agonizing control. But the instinct to protect himself was tied to his fight-or-flight response. He took the route under the underpass. It was cool, dark, and quiet. I need to work on my vector stability, Izuku muttered to himself, pulling out his notebook. He walked without looking, his feet hovering an inch off the concrete. It was a subconscious habit. Walking was jarring, but floating was smooth. If I can reduce the activation time of the repulsion field by 0.5 seconds, I can effectively counter speed-type quirks like Ida's or slop. Squish. The sound of wet movement stopped him. Izuku's feet touched the ground. He looked up. From the sewer grate ahead, a massive, undulating mass of dark green sludge was oozing out. It rose up, forming a chaotic, liquid shape with wide, manic eyes and a gaping maw filled with fluid teeth, a medium-sized invisibility cloak. The villain gurgled, his voice sounding like drowning. You'll do perfectly, kid. Izuku didn't scream. He analyzed. Fluid body. No solid grip points. Viscosity seems high. Physical attacks will pass through. The villain lunged. It was fast, faster than a human. Before Izuku could raise a hand, the sludge slammed into him. Gah! The slime forced its way into his mouth and nose. It was cold, and tasted of sewage and rot. Izuku clawed at the fluid, but his fingers slipped through. Don't struggle, the villain whispered into his ear. It'll only hurt for a minute. I just need your body to hide from him. Panic flared. Real, primal panic. Izuku's vision began to spot with black. He couldn't breathe. His lungs were burning. I'm going to die. I'm going to die here, in a tunnel, before I even apply to UA. No. The thought was a spike of adrenaline. Think. Think. Gravity affects everything. Even liquids. Even sludge. His vision was fading, but he could feel the mass of the villain. It was heavy, dense. Izuku stopped clawing. He dropped his hands to his sides. He focused not on his breath, but on the core of his being, that strange, humming engine in his gut that defied the world. Field expansion, 1 meter. Target, foreign biomass. Vector out. Izuku's eyes snapped open. Even under the sludge, they glowed with a brilliant, blinding violet light. Repulsion. The command was a mental scream. Boom. The air inside the tunnel distorted violently. A spherical shockwave of reversed gravity exploded outward from Izuku's body. The sludge villain didn't just let go, he was blasted apart. The cohesive forces holding his liquid body together were overridden by a sudden, violent gravitational shear. The slime was thrown backward against the concrete walls of the tunnel with the force of a high-pressure fire hose. Splat! The villain shrieked as his main body was flattened against the curved ceiling of the tunnel. Izuku fell to his hands and knees, retching. He coughed up a glob of slime, gasping for sweet, dry air. His head was pounding like a drum. The tunnel was spinning. The ground felt like it was tilting vertical. You little brat! The sludge was dripping down the walls, trying to reform. The eyes coalesced, glaring at Izuku with murderous intent. You think that's enough? I'm fluid. I can. Izuku looked up. He wiped the slime from his mouth. He was dizzy, his balance shot, but he was angry. He raised his right hand, fingers splayed. Stay, Izuku growled. He clenched his fist. High gravity zone, 10x. The air in the tunnel groaned. The pressure dropped instantly. The sludge villain, who had begun to rise, was slammed back down onto the concrete. It was as if the air above him had turned into a pillar of lead. The fluid flattened out, spreading into a thin puddle. The eyes bulged in agony. Gah! Heavy! So heavy! Izuku stood up, swaying drunkenly. He kept his hand clenched. He had to maintain the focus. If he let go, the villain would reform. He walked toward the puddle, his steps heavy and uncoordinated. Don't move, Izuku slurred. The vertigo was bad. He felt like he was falling endlessly while standing still. Fear not, citizen. For I am here. The manhole cover at the entrance of the tunnel exploded upward. A massive figure landed in the tunnel, creating a shockwave of wind. Blonde hair, impossibly muscular, a smile that cut through the darkness. All Might. The number 1 hero struck a pose, ready to do battle. I chased this villain through the sewer system, but All Might paused. He blinked. He looked at the scene before him. There was a teenage boy, covered in slime, swaying on his feet with a nosebleed, holding his hand out like a claw. And there was the villain, a terrifying, amorphous monster, plastered to the floor, flattened into a two-dimensional puddle, whimpering in pain. I can't get up. The villain groaned. My mass, too heavy. All Might looked from the villain to the boy. He sensed the distortion in the air, the heavy static that made the hair on his arms stand up. Young man? All Might asked, stepping forward. Izuku turned his head. His eyes widened. The glow in his eyes faded. All Might? The moment Izuku lost focus, the gravity field collapsed. The pressure vanished. The villain gasped, his body instantly trying to reform, surging upward to attack the distracted boy. Look out! All Might shouted, but Izuku didn't move. He simply tipped over, his equilibrium finally failing him completely. He collapsed sideways, unconscious before he hit the ground. All Might moved faster than the eye could follow. Texas. Smash! The wind pressure from the punch scattered the reforming villain instantly, blowing him into droplets. All Might deftly uncorked a soda bottle he had in his pocket, and scooped up the main mass of the villain in a blur of motion. Silence returned to the tunnel. All Might stood over the unconscious boy. He looked at the scattered slime, then at the cratered concrete where the villain had been pinned. Incredible, All Might whispered, his signature smile faltering for just a second into a look of genuine curiosity. He subdued a fluid villain, with pure pressure? He knelt down and gently tapped Izuku's cheek. Hey! Hey! Are you alright, young man? Consciousness returned to Izuku in segments. First, the smell of antiseptic. Then, the feeling of a cold compress on his forehead. Finally, the realization that the world was still spinning, though much slower now. He opened his eyes. He wasn't in a hospital. He was sitting on the pavement outside the tunnel. The police were there, cordoning off the area. Ah, you're awake! Izuku looked up. His heart stopped. All Might was sitting on the guardrail, looking down at him. All Might! Izuku scrambled backward, immediately losing his balance and falling onto his butt. Ah, you, here! All Might laughed, a booming sound that seemed to chase away the lingering fear. Ideally, I would have saved you sooner. But it seems you had the situation well in hand. That is a formidable quirk you have there, young man. Telekinesis? G-gravity, Izuku stuttered, his fanboy instincts warring with his nausea. Manipulation of graviton particles to create localized fields of, never mind. Can I have your autograph? He reached for his backpack, which had been retrieved by the police. He pulled out a soggy, slime-covered notebook. All Might laughed again and signed the page in a blur. There you go. Now I must be off to turn this slimy fellow into the police. He patted his pocket, where the soda bottle sat. Wait. Izuku stood up, swaying. I have a question. All Might paused, crouching to jump. Izuku swallowed. Can someone with a power that hurts them, can they be a hero like you? Everyone says my quirk is strong, but it makes me sick. I can't fight for long. I'm not invulnerable like you. All Might looked at the boy. He saw the desperate look in those green eyes. He saw the nosebleed that hadn't fully stopped. He felt the phantom pain in his own side, the wound that had destroyed his respiratory system. A power that hurts you, huh? All Might thought. Young man, All Might said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming serious. There is no hero who is invulnerable. We all pay a price. The question is not whether your power hurts you. The question is whether you are willing to bear that weight to save others. Izuku stared. You acted today, All Might continued. You fought. You held your ground. You have the spirit. If you can learn to carry that weight, then yes. All Might turned and leaped into the sky, a sonic boom marking his departure. Yes, Izuku whispered to the empty air. Tears pricked his eyes. He said yes. Izuku's mood was ecstatic as he walked toward the city center. He felt lighter than he had in years. The nausea was a small price to pay for validation from the symbol of peace. But as he approached the shopping district, the atmosphere changed. Smoke blacked out the sky. Sirens wailed. A crowd had gathered, pressed against the police barricades. Izuku pushed his way to the front. What's happening? A villain, a bystander said, pointing. He took a hostage. Caught a kid. The heroes can't get in. Izuku looked. His blood ran cold. The alleyway was an inferno. Explosions were rocking the buildings, shattering windows. In the center of the flames, surrounded by a barrier of fire, was the sludge villain. I escaped. The villain roared, his body massive now, fed by the fires. And this time, I've got a better suit. Trapped inside the slime, struggling violently, was Katsuki Bakugo. Katsuki was letting off explosion after explosion, but it was useless. The explosions just fed the fire, creating a feedback loop of heat and chaos. The heroes, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, were helpless. I can't get close. Kamui Woods shouted. The fire is too intense. My giant form can't fit in the alley. Empty Lady cried. Izuku watched. He saw Katsuki's face. Katsuki wasn't looking at the heroes. He was looking at the crowd. His eyes were wide, filled with a raw, naked terror that Izuku had only seen once before, 10 years ago, in the sandbox. Katsuki was suffocating. He was dying. Why aren't they moving? Izuku muttered. Why is nobody moving? The nausea from earlier was still there. His head still swam. His inner ear was compromised. Using his quirk now would be dangerous. He could pass out. He could stroke out. But Kaken is dying. Izuku didn't think. He didn't weigh the pros and cons. The barricade tape snapped as Izuku dashed under it. Hey! Kid! Stop! Death Arms shouted. Izuku didn't run. Running was too slow. Running required friction. He kicked off the ground. Zero gravity self. Izuku became weightless. He pushed off the asphalt, launching himself like a bullet. He flew over the heads of the heroes, soaring straight into the heart of the inferno. The heat was intense. The air was warping. You! The sludge villain saw him. The brat from the tunnel! The villain lashed out with a tendril of slime. Izuku was floating in midair, momentum carrying him forward. He twisted his body, instinct taking over. Vector shift down, he slapped the air. The gravity above the tendril magnified instantly, slamming the attack into the pavement before it could touch him. Izuku landed, or rather, hovered 3 meters from the villain. The fire roared around him. Get out of here, Deku! Bakugo choked out, his voice wet and gurgled. Shut up! Izuku yelled back, his voice cracking. He raised both hands. The violet aura exploded around him, brighter and more unstable than ever before. I'm saving you! You can't touch me! The villain laughed. I'm fluid! I don't need to touch you! Izuku grit his teeth. I just need to move you. Izuku focused on the fire surrounding them. The flames were rising, fed by the updraft. Graviton well, vacuum. Izuku clapped his hands together. He created a localized point of intense gravity above the flames, but away from Bakugo. The effect was immediate. The fire didn't just rise, it was ripped away. The flames were sucked upward into a tight spiral, starved of oxygen near the ground, clearing a path. The sudden drop in air pressure caused the windows of the adjacent buildings to shatter inward. Now let him go! Izuku thrust his hands forward. He couldn't crush the villain. Katsuki was inside. He couldn't repel him. It might rip Katsuki apart. He had to separate them. Izuku focused on Katsuki's specific mass. He grabbed Katsuki's signature with his mind. 0 gravity. Katsuki became weightless inside the slime. Then, Izuku focused on the slime. Gravity 5x. The contrast was violent. The sludge became incredibly heavy, sagging and pulling downward toward the earth. Katsuki, lighter than air, naturally buoyed upward. Gah! What is this? The villain screamed. The slime slid off Katsuki's face, pulled down by its own sudden weight. Katsuki gasped, taking a huge breath of air. Kaken! Blast him! Izuku screamed, blood beginning to trickle from both nostrils. His vision was tunneling. The vertigo was hitting him like a sledgehammer. Bakugo didn't hesitate. Free from the suffocating pressure, he unleashed all his pent-up rage. Boom! A massive explosion ripped through the slime, scattering the villain's heavy body across the alley walls. Izuku's hold broke. The gravity returned to normal. Izuku fell from the air, his legs giving out. He hit the ground hard, rolling onto his side. The world was spinning so fast he couldn't tell if his eyes were open or closed. He dry-heaved, clutching his stomach. Detroit. Smash! The wind pressure arrived a second later. All Might had arrived. Even though he was past his limit, inspired by the boys, he forced out one last attack. The punch created a tornado that sucked up the scattered remains of the villain and altered the weather, causing rain to fall from the sky. The fire was out. The villain was defeated. Izuku lay on the wet pavement, gasping. Shadows fell over him. The pro-heroes were there. Are you insane? Kamui Woods was shouting. You could have gotten yourself killed. That was reckless. That was illegal quirk usage. Izuku couldn't answer. He was trying to keep the contents of his stomach down, but... Death Arms grunted, crossing his arms. That was terrifyingly effective. You controlled the fire? And the villain? Izuku managed to sit up. He wiped the blood from his nose. A few feet away, the heroes were praising Bakugo. That resistance. That bravery. You're a natural. But Bakugo wasn't listening to them. He was staring at Izuku. Bakugo sat on the ground, soot-stained and wet. His chest was heaving. He looked at his own hands, then at Izuku, who was being scolded. Bakugo knew physics. He knew what had happened. Izuku hadn't just pushed the villain, he had manipulated the density of the encounter. He had made Bakugo light and the villain heavy. He had controlled the entire battlefield. He saved me, Bakugo thought, a bitter bow rising in his throat. The pebbles saved the boulder. The sun was setting by the time Izuku was released. He had been lectured for an hour about vigilantism, though the police had let him off with a warning since no one was hurt, and the damage was contained. He walked home slowly, dragging his feet. He felt drained, empty, like a battery that had been short-circuited. Deku! Izuku stopped. He turned around. Katsuki ran up to him, stopping a few meters away. He was panting, his uniform ruined. Kaken? I didn't ask for your help. Katsuki yelled. His voice was raw. And you didn't save me, got it? I was fine. I would have found a way, Izuku sighed. Is that all? No. Katsuki stepped forward. His eyes were blazing. You used your quirk. You flew. You controlled the fire. You were looking down on me again. I wasn't looking down on you, Izuku said tiredly. I was just looking at you. Shut up. Bakugo clenched his fists. You think you're some kind of god because you can control gravity? You think you're better than All Might? No. Then watch me. Bakugo slammed his hand against his chest. I'm going to UA. And I'm going to become a hero who doesn't need saving. I'm going to be so strong that your little gravity tricks won't even be able to lift me. Don't you dare die before I beat you, Deku. Bakugo spun around and marched off, his shoulders tense. Izuku watched him go. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't a friendly declaration, but it was an acknowledgement. Bakugo saw him, not as a pebble on the side of the road, but as a mountain to be climbed. I am here. Izuku jumped, nearly floating away. All Might slid out from around a corner in his skeletal form, coughing up a bit of blood. All Might? Why are you, skeleton? The masquerade is over, All Might sighed, wiping his mouth. He explained his condition, the injury, the time limit, the truth behind the symbol of peace. Izuku listened, stunned. The god was mortal. The legend was a dying man. Young Midoriya, All Might said, looking Izuku in the eye. I watched you today. I saw you run in when the pros stood back. I saw you endure the pain of your own power to save a life. My body moved on its own, Izuku admitted. I didn't think. That, All Might said, pointing a finger at him, is the essence of a hero. Meddling where you don't belong because you cannot bear to see another suffer. All Might took a deep breath. I have been looking for a successor. Someone to inherit my will. But today, I realized something. Izuku held his breath. You have a power that rivals the greatest quirks in history, All Might said. Gravity is a fundamental force. In the right hands it can move mountains. In the wrong hands it can crush the world. All Might placed a large, bony hand on Izuku's shoulder. You don't need my power, Izuku Midoriya. You have your own burden to carry. But you need guidance. You need to learn how to bear the weight of the world without breaking your own neck. Izuku's voice trembled. I will train you, All Might promised. I will help you master this graviton. I will help you build a body that can withstand the forces you command. You saved me today, in a way. You reminded me why we do this. The wind blew through the street, rustling the leaves. You can be a hero, All Might said. Izuku didn't cry. He didn't fall to his knees. He stood tall. He felt the gravity of the earth pulling at him, the constant, unyielding anchor of reality. And for the first time, he didn't feel like it was dragging him down. He felt like he was holding it up. He clenched his fist, the violet aura flickering briefly around his fingers. I'll do it, Izuku said, his eyes burning with a new fire. I'll go higher than anyone. The Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a graveyard of consumption. It was a monument to the things people bought, used, broke, and discarded, a towering, rusted skyline of refrigerators, tires, and crushed sedans that blocked the view of the ocean. The air smelled of salt, rust, and rotting seaweed. It was here, amidst the wreckage of modern convenience, that All Might decided to build a god. Again. The skeletal man shouted, sitting atop a precarious pile of microwave ovens. He checked a stopwatch, his blue eyes sharp and critical. 10 meters away, Izuku Midoriya stood on one leg atop a washing machine. He was blindfolded. His arms were outstretched, trembling not from the weight of an object, but from the weight of his own perception. In the air around him, 5 rubber tires floated in a complex, shifting orbit. They didn't just hover, they weaved. One went clockwise, 2 went counterclockwise, 1 bobbed vertically, and the last one traced a figure-8 pattern. Equilibrium check. All Might barked. Axis Z0. Horizon stable, Izuku gritted out, sweat dripping from his chin. Gravity intensification on Object 3. Crush it. Izuku didn't hesitate. He isolated the mental thread connected to the third tire, the one bobbing vertically. He didn't use a hand gesture. He used a mental flex, a sudden clamping of his will. Snap! The air pressure around the tire spiked. With a sound like a gunshot, the rubber imploded, folding in on itself until it was a dense, twisted puck of black material. It dropped to the sand with a heavy thud, significantly heavier than it should have been. Release! Izuku exhaled sharply. The violet aura around the remaining tires vanished. They fell chaotically, bouncing off the washing machine and the sand. Izuku ripped the blindfold off and immediately fell to his knees. He retched, dry heaving into the sand. The world was spinning. To his brain, the horizon was currently doing cartwheels. The fluid in his inner ears was sloshing violently, confused by the rapid shifting of gravitational vectors he had been managing. Time, 45 seconds, All Might said, jumping down from his perch. He landed softly, kicking up a small cloud of dust. That's a 5-second improvement from yesterday, young Midoriya. But you still look like you've just stepped off a centrifuge. Izuku wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, breathing heavily. It's the multitasking. Holding one object at 0g is easy. Holding 4 at 0, moving them in different vectors, and crushing a 5th at 10 gs. It scrambles my vestibular system. All Might handed him a bottle of water. Which is exactly why we are here. Your quirk, graviton, is a mutation of the highest order. It interacts with the fundamental forces of the universe, but your brain is still human. Your inner ear is still human. All Might gestured to the beach. Most heroes train their muscles to punch harder. You must train your brain to accept a new reality. You must convince your body that down is merely a suggestion. It had been 2 weeks since the sludge villain incident. 2 weeks since All Might had sat Izuku down in a small cafe and told him the truth. I am dying, and I am not giving you my power. It had been a shock. For years, Izuku had fantasized about a secret power transfer, a magic bullet. But All Might had been firm. You don't need one for all, the hero had said. You have a quirk that could crack the tectonic plates if you grew strong enough. If I gave you my power on top of that, you wouldn't survive. You'd implode. No, my boy. My legacy to you won't be a quirk. It will be the training to make you the first natural-born symbol of peace. So, the aim to pass, American Dream Plan was born. But it wasn't just cleaning trash. It was a regimen designed to harden Izuku's body against the backlash of his own physics-breaking power. Newton's third law, All Might said, tapping his temple. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. When you punch with gravity, the universe pushes back against your senses. If you want to fire a cannon, you must build a carriage that won't shatter. Izuku stood up. His legs were shaking, but he locked his knees. He looked at the mountains of trash. I need to be heavier, Izuku murmured. I need more mass. Correct. All Might beamed. He transformed, puffing up into his muscular form for a brief second to flex. You are a twig. A leaf in the wind. When you manipulate gravity, you become the center of that field. If the center is weak, the field collapses. You need muscles. You need density. You need to become a singularity. All Might pointed to a rusted, stripped-down chassis of a pickup truck half buried in the sand. No quirks for this part, All Might commanded. Drag that truck to the treeling. Pure muscle. We build the vessel first. Then we fill it with power. Izuku looked at the truck. It must have weighed a ton. Yes, sir, Izuku said. He walked toward the truck, his hands gripping the frayed tow rope. He pulled. The rope bit into his palms. The truck groaned but didn't move. Pull! All Might shouted, acting as the drill sergeant. Pull until your fibers tear. Pull until you feel the gravity of the earth trying to stop you, and then defy it with your own 2 hands. Izuku grit his teeth. He dug his heels into the sand. He visualized the goal. UA high. The hero course. The look on Bakugo's face. The truck shifted an inch. Higher, Izuku thought. I have to go higher. 5 months later. The change was gradual, then exponential. Izuku Midoriya had always been invisible. He was the quiet kid in the back of the class, the mutterer, the nerd. But as the months of the American Dream Plan wore on, his presence in the classroom began to shift. He stopped hunching. His shoulders broadened. The standard-issue uniform, once loose, began to fit snugly around the chest and arms. He didn't walk with the timid, shuffling gait of a victim anymore. He walked with a strange, gliding smoothness, a habit picked up from months of training his balance to be absolute. And Bakugo noticed. It was lunch break. Izuku was sitting at his desk, eating a high-protein bento his mother had prepared, reading a textbook on advanced calculus. Izuku didn't flinch. He finished chewing, swallowed, and marked his page before looking up. Katsuki Bakugo stood over him. The explosive boy looked tired, his eyes rimmed with red, but the aggression was as sharp as ever. Bakugo had been training too, everyone knew it. He was pushing himself to the breaking point. You've been disappearing after school, Bakugo accused. Every day. You run off somewhere. I'm training, Kaken, Izuku said simply. Training? Bakugo scoffed, but his eyes scanned Izuku's frame. He saw the thick neck muscles, the calluses on the hands that held the chopsticks. You think lifting weights is going to help you? You think getting swole changes anything? It changes my center of gravity, Izuku replied calmly. It helps with the recoil. Bakugo kicked the leg of Izuku's desk. It wasn't a violent kick, just a disrespectful one. Don't get cocky. I saw what you did at the sludge incident. You almost passed out after one move. You're a glass cannon, Deku. One big hit and you're down. I can fire explosions all day. You use your quirk for 5 minutes and you're puking your guts out. That's why I'm training, Izuku said. He met Bakugo's glare. To increase the limit. It won't be enough, Bakugo snarled, leaning down, his face inches from Izuku's. UA isn't a playground. It's a war zone. If you stand in my way, I'll blast you into orbit. And I won't need gravity to do it. You can try, Izuku said. The class went silent. It was the first time Izuku had ever openly challenged Bakugo without stuttering. Bakugo's eye twitched. Sparks popped on his palm. For a second, it looked like a fight would break out right there. Then Bakugo straightened up. He let out a harsh, barking laugh. Good. Good. It wouldn't be fun crushing you if you were still a bug. Be a rock, Deku. Be a damn mountain. I'll blow it all up anyway. Bakugo walked away. Izuku exhaled slowly. He put a hand on his stomach. The nausea wasn't there, but the memory of it was. Bakugo was right. The weakness of graviton was the sensory overload. If Izuku lost his equilibrium, he was helpless. I have 5 more months, Izuku thought, returning to his calculus. I have to master the inner ear. I have to master the vertigo. 10 months later, the morning of the exam, the Dagoba beach was unrecognizable. Where there had been mountains of trash, there was now a pristine stretch of white sand, glittering in the golden sunrise. The ocean lapped gently against the shore, unobstructed for the first time in years. Standing in the center of the clean beach, atop the only remaining structure, a small concrete pier, was Izuku Midoriya. He was shirtless, his body glistening with sweat. He was no longer the scrawny child. He was cut from marble, a compact powerhouse of lean, dense muscle. His back was defined, his abs sharp, his arms roped with veins. Time! All Might called out. Izuku opened his eyes. They glowed with a fierce, violet intensity. Around him, floating in a perfect, complex solar system, were 50 large rocks, each weighing at least 20 pounds. They were orbiting him in 3 distinct rings, moving at different speeds. Convergence! All Might shouted. Izuku clapped his hands. The 50 rocks stopped instantly. Then, with a unified thrum of power, they slammed together at a single point 10 meters in front of him. They didn't just pile up. They were crushed together by a momentary singularity, grinding stone against stone until they formed a perfectly spherical boulder floating in the air. Disperse! Izuku swept his hand horizontally. The gravity field inverted. The boulder exploded outward, not from an impact, but from a sudden repulsion force. The stones were fired like grapeshot into the ocean, creating 50 simultaneous splashes that sent water spraying high into the air. Izuku lowered his hand. The glow faded. He took a deep breath. He stood on one leg. He closed his eyes. Equilibrium? All Might asked. Stable, Izuku said. He opened his eyes. He didn't stumble. He didn't vomit. There was a dull ache behind his eyes, a low hum in his ears, but he was standing. All Might swelled into his hero form, his smile blinding. Oh! Oh my goodness! He rushed forward and enveloped Izuku in a crushing hug. You did it! You cleared the beach, and you mastered the vector control. You are ready, young Midoriya. You are a vessel worthy of the stars. Izuku smiled, his face buried in All Might's shirt. I feel heavy, All Might. But in a good way. That is the weight of effort. All Might declared, setting him down. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. Here. A congratulatory gift before you head to the exam. Izuku opened it. It was a pair of specialized earplugs, custom dampers, All Might explained. They help regulate air pressure in the ear canal. They won't stop the vertigo completely, but they will help stabilize your inner ear fluid during rapid gravity shifts. Support items are allowed in the exam if registered. I registered them for you. Izuku stared at the earplugs. They were sleek black, with a small gold accent. Thank you, Izuku whispered. He clenched them in his hand. I won't let you down. You never could, All Might said softly. Now go! The world is waiting to be lifted. The gates of UA. The UA campus was massive. It was a fortress of glass and steel, shaped like an H4 hero, looming over the city. Izuku stood at the main gate, dressed in his black junior high uniform. It felt tight across the shoulders now. He adjusted the specialized plugs in his ears. They dampened the noise of the crowd, making everything sound underwater, focused. He took a step forward. This is it. The event horizon. Once I cross this line, there is no going back. He was so focused on his internal monologue, so focused on the gravity of the moment, that he didn't notice the uneven pavement brick. His foot caught. In any other timeline, he would have tripped. He would have flailed. He would have braced for impact. But Izuku Midoriya had spent 10 months balancing on washing machines while blindfolded. As he tipped forward, his instinct didn't panic. It calculated. Center of mass shifting forward. Angle of descent, 45 degrees. Correction required. Before he could activate his quirk to right himself, he stopped. Not by his own doing. He was frozen in midair, leaning forward like a statue defying physics. He looked down. His feet were hovering an inch off the ground. Are you okay? The voice was bright, bubbly, and concerned. Izuku looked to his right. A girl with a bob cut and round, rosy cheeks was standing there. Her hand was extended, glowing with a soft pink light. Her fingertips were pressed against his shoulder. I used my quirk on you, she said, smiling apologetically. Sorry. It's bad luck to trip, right? She gently guided him back to a vertical position. Release. She chimed, pressing her fingertips together. Izuku felt his weight return instantly. His boots clicked against the pavement. He looked at her. He blinked. You. Izuku started. His analyst brain kicked into overdrive, bypassing his social anxiety through sheer curiosity. You removed my gravitational pull. But you had to touch me to do it. The girl blinked, surprised by the immediate technical breakdown. Yeah? That's my quirk. Zero gravity, Izuku repeated. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. That's ironic. Ironic? She tilted her head. I'm Ochaco Uraraka. Are you nervous? You look intense. Izuku adjusted his backpack straps. I'm Izuku Midoriya. And your quirk? It removes the mass interaction with the Higgs field, essentially? Or does it create a skin layer repulsion field against the Earth? Ochaco laughed nervously, rubbing the back of her head. I don't know the science stuff. I just touch things, and they float. But if I use it too much, I get really nauseous. Izuku's eyes widened. Nausea. Vestibular disruption? Yeah. Like supercarsic. Me too, Izuku said, stepping closer, his intensity spiking. It's the disconnect between visual data and physical sensation. Your inner ear can't reconcile the lack of weight. Do you focus on a horizon point when you release? Do you regulate your breathing to stabilize your blood pressure? Ochako stepped back, slightly overwhelmed but intrigued. I just try not to throw up. Izuku realized he was muttering. He clamped a hand over his mouth. Sorry. I have a similar quirk. Gravity manipulation. Really? Ochako's eyes sparkled. We're quirk cousins. That's so cool. But wait, you didn't float when you tripped. Does yours work differently? I have range, Izuku said, tapping his temple. And vector control. But I have to maintain a mental link. Yours is impressive. You touched me, and the effect was absolute. You didn't have to concentrate to keep me floating, did you? Nope. Once I touch it, it's light until I say release. Permanent state alteration without active cognitive load, Izuku muttered, pulling a notebook out of his pocket and scribbling furiously. That's incredible. If you could increase your weight limit, you could effectively neutralize structural collapses without the mental strain that I have. You're a localized anchor, I'm a field generator. Hey! You're holding up the line. A blond boy with glasses and an impatient expression was gesturing at them from the gate. Tenya Ida? Oh. Sorry. Ochako squeaked. She looked at Izuku. Good luck, Midoriya. Maybe I'll see you inside. Let's do our best with the nausea. She pumped a fist and ran off. Izuku watched her go. Zero gravity, he thought. Simple. Elegant. Dangerous. He looked at his own hand. His power was a storm. Hers was a balloon. But balloons could go places storms couldn't. Interesting, he whispered. Then, he walked through the gates. The orientation. The auditorium was dark, lit only by the spotlight on the eccentric hero, Present Mike. Everybody say hey. Silence. Izuku sat in the middle row. Next to him, Bakugo was vibrating with suppressed rage and anticipation. Welcome to the live performance. Present Mike continued undeterred. He began to explain the practical exam. 10 minutes. 3 types of robots. Points based on difficulty. Izuku was analyzing the silhouettes on the screen. 1 pointer, speed type. Likely weak armor. Can be crushed easily. 2 pointer, defensive type. Probably heavy. Repulsion would be effective. 3 pointer, heavy assault. Massive. Lifting it might be too straining. Better to target the joints or internal mechanisms. Excuse me. May I ask a question? A hand shot up. It was the boy with glasses from the gate. Spotlight on him. There appear to be 4 types of villains on this handout. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prestigious school in Japan, should be ashamed. And you, Ida spun around, pointing a finger directly at Izuku. You've been muttering this whole time. It's distracting. If you're here to conduct a social experiment, then please leave, the auditorium snickered. Bakugo smirked, glancing sideways at Izuku, waiting for him to shrink. Izuku stood up. The snickering stopped. Izuku didn't look embarrassed. He looked annoyed. He adjusted his earplugs. I was calculating the structural density required to disable a 2-ton chassis without causing shrapnel damage to nearby competitors, Izuku said, his voice carrying clearly without a microphone. It's called strategy. Maybe you should try it instead of shouting. He sat back down. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Present Mike coughed. All right. Okay. Examinee number 7111 gives us a cool segue. The 4th villain is 0 points. It's just an obstacle. Avoid it. Now break a leg, listeners. As the lights came up, Bakugo leaned in. You got a mouth on you now, Deku. I'm just tired of people looking down, Izuku said, gathering his things. Battle Center B. The gates to the mock city were massive. A crowd of students gathered, stretching, checking their gear. The tension was palpable. Izuku stood near the back. He was wearing a simple green tracksuit. He checked his earplugs again. He did a few neck stretches, testing his balance. He spotted Ochaco Uraraka near the front. She looked terrified. She was slapping her cheeks, trying to hype herself up. She was wearing tight clothes, likely to minimize loose fabric getting caught while floating. Izuku walked up to her. Uraraka. She jumped. Oh. Midoriya. You're in this center too? Wow, I'm so nervous. My heart is going to explode. Breathe, Izuku said calmly. In through the nose, hold for 4, out through the mouth. She tried it. It helped a little. Listen, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a strategic whisper. Based on the robot designs, they have a high center of gravity. You don't need to lift them all the way to the sky. I don't? No. Just touch them, remove their gravity, and push them gently. Their momentum will make them flip. Once they're upside down, they can't right themselves. It saves energy. Don't fight the weight. Remove it. Ochaco stared at him. Flip them like turtles? Exactly. Turtle strategy. Start. Present mixed voice boomed from a tower. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real fights. Go! 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 The crowd surged forward. Izuku didn't run. He raised his right hand. Gravity field, reduced. He lowered the gravity affecting his own body to 10%. He kicked off the ground. Whoosh! He didn't run, he bounded. Like an astronaut on the moon, he took massive, leaping strides, soaring over the heads of the stunned examinees. He cleared the gate in a single jump, landing on the roof of the first building just as the other students were bottlenecking at the entrance. He's flying! Someone shouted. No, Izuku muttered, sprinting across the rooftop. I'm falling with style. The practical exam. The city became a war zone. Explosions, shouting, and the grinding of metal filled the air. Izuku moved like a phantom. He stayed high, hopping from rooftop to rooftop. Below him, a three-pointer, a massive tank-like robot, turned the corner, targeting a group of students. Izuku leaped off the roof. He fell toward the robot. Target, upper chassis. Mass, approximate 3 tons. As he fell, he reached out with both hands. Graviton surge 10x. He didn't touch the robot. He slammed the air above it with his quirk. Crunch. The invisible hammer of God came down. The robot's head and shoulders were instantly flattened into its main body. The legs buckled, the metal screeching as it collapsed into a sparking heap of scrap. Izuku landed on the flattened wreckage. 28 points. He jumped again, launching himself toward a 2-pointer that was raising a weapon. Repulsion. Izuku waved his hand. The robot was blasted sideways, crashing through a brick wall. 32 points. He was racking up points fast. His efficiency was terrifying. He didn't waste time brawling. He simply applied physics where physics wasn't welcome. But the drawback was creeping in. After the 10th robot, the edges of his vision began to blur. The horizon seemed to tilt. His stomach gave a warning lurch. Steady, he told himself. Rely on the training. Rely on the plugs. He landed in an alleyway to catch his breath. Out of the way, a laser beam cut through the air. A student with a naval laser blasted a 1-pointer. Izuku checked the time. 2 minutes left. He had 45 points. That was likely enough to pass, but he wanted to be sure. He wanted to be undeniable. Then, the ground shook. Boom, boom. Dust billowed from the center of the city. A shadow fell over the streets, blocking out the sun. The 0-pointer. It was colossal. It was taller than the skyscrapers. Its hand alone was the size of a bus. It punched a building, sending debris raining down on the fleeing students. That's too big. A student screamed. Run! The crowd turned and fled. The sheer scale of the threat triggered primal fear. Even Izuku felt the urge to retreat. It was a 0-point obstacle. There was no reason to fight it. He turned to run. Oh wow! The cry was faint, buried under the rumble of the collapsing building. Izuku stopped. He looked back. Through the dust, he saw her. Ochaco Uraraka was trapped. A massive slab of concrete had pinned her leg. She was struggling, her face pale, trying to reach the debris to float it, but she was exhausted. She had vomited. The nausea had gotten her. She was helpless. The 0-pointer loomed over her. Its massive treads were grinding the pavement, seconds away from crushing her. Izuku's body moved. He didn't think about points. He didn't think about passing. He didn't think about the vertigo that was already clawing at his brain. He kicked the ground. 0 gravity self. He launched himself. He flew past the fleeing students. He flew straight at the Titan. Midoriya? Ida, who was running away, stopped and looked back. Izuku soared upward. He bypassed Uraraka completely. He wasn't going to lift the rock. That would take too long. The robot was too close. He had to stop the robot. He flew higher. 10 meters. 20 meters. 50 meters. He reached the eye level of the zero-pointer. The massive machine's red optical sensors locked onto the gnat floating in front of it. Izuku hovered there, suspended in the sky. The wind whipped his hair. His heart pounded in his ears, louder than the destruction below. He remembered All Might's words. You need to become a singularity. Izuku reached out with both arms. He spread his fingers wide. He didn't target a limb. He targeted the entire machine. The nausea hit him immediately, a premonition of the cost he was about to pay. The headache spiked like a railroad spike through his temple. Grit your teeth, he told himself. Bear the weight. The violet aura around Izuku flared, turning from a mist into a raging fire. The air around him distorted, light bending as the gravitational field intensified. Graviton art. He brought his hands together, interlocking his fingers, slamming his palms shut. Event horizon. He grabbed the gravity vector of the colossal robot and pulled it inward. The effect was apocalyptic. The zero-pointer groaned. The metal screamed. The center of the robot's torso crumbled as if a black hole had opened inside its chest. The head was sucked down. The shoulders were sucked in. The massive treads lifted off the ground, dragged toward the center of the implosion. The robot didn't explode. It imploded. In 3 seconds, the building-sized machine was crushed into a dense, jagged sphere of scrap metal, suspended in the air. The shockwave of the air rushing in to fill the vacuum knocked the nearby students off their feet. Izuku held the sphere for 1 second. 2 seconds. Then, his eyes rolled back. The vertigo didn't just hit him. It severed his connection to the world. He didn't know up from down. He didn't know who he was. The violet light vanished. The sphere of scrap dropped to the street with a quake that registered on seismographs 3 miles away. Izuku fell from the sky. He was limp, unconscious, plummeting from 50 meters. Release! A hand slapped his cheek. Izuku stopped falling, inches from the pavement. Ochaco Uraraka, leaning on a piece of debris, panting and covered in dust, held her hand out. She had freed herself just in time. She had watched him crush a god, and then she had watched him fall. She puked immediately after, but she didn't release the quirk. I got you, she wheezed. Spaceman. Recovery. It sounds worse than it is. Recovery girl sighed, peeling a sensor off Izuku's forehead. He was lying in a bed in the infirmary. All Might stood in the corner, looking anxious. No broken bones, the old woman said. His muscles are incredibly dense. They took the strain well. But his inner ear is severely irritated. He has a grade 2 concussion, not from impact, but from cranial pressure caused by his own quirk. Izuku blinked, looking at the ceiling. The room was still spinning slowly. Did I? Izuku croaked. Did I pass? You destroyed a robot the size of a skyscraper, young Midoriya, All Might said gently. And you saved a life. The practical results will be mailed to you, but... All Might gave a thumbs up. I wouldn't worry. The girl? Izuku asked. Miss Uraraka is fine, Recovery Girl said. Exhausted, but fine. She came by earlier to ask if you were alive. She said you were totally metal? Izuku let out a weak laugh, which made his head throb. You need to be careful, Sonny, Recovery Girl warned. That move, that event horizon, if you use that too often, you won't just get dizzy. You could cause a cerebral hemorrhage. Your body is strong, but blood vessels are delicate. I know, Izuku whispered. He clenched his fist. He could still feel the phantom weight of the zero-pointer. It had been heavy. So incredibly heavy. But he had lifted it. 1 week later, the letter arrived. Inko Midoriya was shaking as she handed it to him. Izuku took it to his room. He sat at his desk, staring at the wax seal of Yue. He tore it open. A holographic disc fell out. All Might appeared. I am here. As a projection, Izuku smiled. Young Midoriya. You performed admirably on the written exam. But the practical, the practical. The video cut to footage of the exam. It showed Izuku crushing the three-pointer. It showed him hopping across roofs. And then, it showed the climax. The footage of the zero-pointer imploding was terrifying. It looked like a special effect from a movie. The camera shook violently as the robot was crushed. You scored 48 villain points, All Might said. A respectable score. But that is not all. The video changed. It showed Uraraka in a negotiation room, pleading with President Mike. Please! Give him my points. He saved me. He crushed that giant thing to save me. I would have been squashed. Izuku's eyes widened. You cannot give away points, All Might narrated. But you can earn them. A hero's job is to save people. Rescue points, 60. The scoreboard appeared. Izuku Midoriya, 108 points. First place. All Might shouted. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya. You have achieved orbit. This is your hero academia. Izuku stared at the hologram. Tears streamed down his face, defying gravity for just a moment before falling to the desk. He wiped them away. I'm in, he whispered. He looked out the window at the sky. Somewhere out there, Bakugo was probably screaming at his own acceptance letter. Somewhere, Uraraka was celebrating. Izuku stood up. He grabbed a grip strengthener from his desk and squeezed it. The real wait was just beginning. The bus ride to Battle Center B was a study in suffocating silence, punctuated only by the nervous tapping of feet and the rhythmic hum of the electric engine. The vehicle was packed with aspiring heroes, each radiating a cocktail of adrenaline, anxiety, and teenage bravado. Izuku Midoriya sat near the back, his eyes closed. He wasn't sleeping. He was calibrating. Atmospheric pressure, 1013 millibars. Ambient gravity, 1 g. Inner ear fluid viscosity, normal. He reached up and adjusted the small, black devices inserted into his ears. The custom dampers, a parting gift from All Might, were currently set to active mode. They created a subtle, reverse-frequency hum that neutralized the chaotic noise of the bus, leaving Izuku in a bubble of muffled calm. They were designed to stabilize the air pressure in his ear canals, a desperate engineering attempt to counteract the violent vertigo that was the price of his power. Hey! The voice was muffled, but close. Izuku opened one eye. The blonde boy with the glasses, Tenya Ida, was sitting across the aisle. His posture was rigid, his expression stern. You have been meditating since we boarded, Ida said, his hand chopping the air stiffly. While I apologize for my earlier outburst in the auditorium, I must ask, are you visualizing a strategy? Or are you simply overwhelmed? Izuku looked at him. The lenses of Ida's glasses reflected the passing cityscape. I'm establishing a baseline, Izuku said quietly. If I don't know which way is up before I start, I won't know which way is down when I finish. Ida blinked, clearly not understanding the gravity, literal and metaphorical, of the statement. I see. Well, let us both do our best to represent our respective schools with honor. Izuku nodded and closed his eye again. Honor is fine, he thought. But physics is better. The bus hissed to a halt. The doors folded open. The massive gates of Battle Center B loomed ahead, a towering archway leading into a sprawling, artificial metropolis. It was a marvel of construction, a fake city built solely to be destroyed. Izuku stepped off the bus. The air smelled of concrete dust and ozone. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs, expanding his ribcage. He felt the weight of his own body, the dense, compacted muscle he had built over 10 months of hell on Dagoba Beach. He was heavy. He was solid. He was ready. Start! The voice of President Mike exploded from the speakers atop the observation towers, so loud it cut through Izuku's dampers. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Go! 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 The crowd of examinees hesitated for a fraction of a second, their brains wired for a 3-2-1 sequence. Izuku didn't hesitate. His eyes snapped open, glowing with a violet luminance that seemed to darken the air immediately around his face. Activation. Gravity field self. Reduction, 60%. The sensation was instantaneous. The heavy, grounding pull of the earth vanished, replaced by a floaty, dreamlike buoyancy. Izuku pushed off the pavement. Normally, a step like that would propel a runner forward a meter. Izuku shot forward 20 meters in a single, loping stride. He moved like an astronaut on a low-gravity moon, bounding over the heads of the stunned students at the front of the pack. He's fast! Someone shouted. He's not running, Ida noted, his engines revving as he sprinted below. He's skimming. Izuku hit the first intersection before anyone else. He skidded to a halt, restoring his gravity to normal instantly to anchor himself. A drone of mechanical whirring came from the left. 3 one-pointer robots, fast, wheeled units with target sensors for eyes, careened around the corner. Target acquired, the lead robot chirped. Izuku didn't assume a fighting stance. He stood straight, his hands hanging loosely by his sides. He watched the robots accelerate. They were light, built for speed. Low mass. High velocity. Vector analysis complete. The lead robot lunged, a mechanical claw swiping for his chest. Izuku raised his right hand, palm open, fingers splayed. He didn't touch the robot. He swiped his hand through the air from right to left, as if backhanding an invisible fly. Lateral shear. The gravity acting on the robot didn't disappear, it shifted. For the robot, down was no longer the street. Down was now the brick wall of the building to its left. The robot's momentum was violently redirected. It flew sideways, slamming into the masonry with a sickening crunch of metal. 1. The other 2 robots didn't process the abstract attack. They continued their charge. Izuku clenched his left fist. Crush. He targeted the space directly between the 2 robots. He created a singularity point, a grapefruit-sized zone of 20x gravity. The 2 robots were yanked toward each other with magnetic ferocity. They collided in midair, their chassis buckling as they were ground together by the invisible pressure. Sparks showered the pavement as they collapsed into a heap of tangled scrap. 2. 3. Izuku exhaled. A dull throb pulsed behind his eyes, the first warning shot from his nervous system. Don't overuse the crush, he reminded himself. It strains the capillaries. Use the environment. He turned and looked down the long avenue. The other students were arriving now, quirks flashing. Explosions, lasers, mutant appendages. I need to go higher, Izuku muttered. He lowered his gravity again and leaped, clearing a 3-story building in a single jump. He landed on the roof, his boots cracking the concrete tiles. From this vantage point, the city was a grid of opportunities. The observation room. In a darkened room lined with monitors, the faculty of UA High watched the chaos unfold. This year's batch is spirited, Midnight purred, tapping a manicured nail against her chin. There's a lot of raw destructive power. Destruction is easy, Cementos rumbled. Application is difficult. We are looking for efficiency. Situational awareness. The ability to act under pressure. On the central screen, a split feed showed the top performers. Bakugo was visible, blasting through robots with terrifying glee. Ida was using his speed to dismantle them with kicks, but one screen drew the eyes of the principal. Curious, Niza squeaked, his paws folded over his tea. Monitor G4. The boy in the green tracksuit, Eraserhead, who had been slumping in the back, opened his tired eyes. He looked at the screen. Izuku was on a rooftop. Below him, a massive 3-pointer was rampaging through an alleyway, cornering a student with a crystallization quirk. Izuku didn't jump down. He didn't fire a beam. He simply reached out toward a water tower on the adjacent roof. On the screen, the heavy steel tank was ripped from its supports. It floated effortlessly through the air, guided by the boy's hand. He positioned it directly over the 3-pointer. Then, he made a downward chopping motion. The tank plummeted. But it fell too fast. It accelerated at nearly 3 times the speed of natural terminal velocity. Crash! The tank smashed into the robot, crushing it instantly under tons of water and steel. The crystallized student was soaked but unharmed. Telekinesis? Midnight asked. No, All Might spoke up from the shadows in the corner. He was in his buff form, but he was leaning heavily against the wall. Not telekinesis. He isn't moving the object with his mind. He is commanding the space the object occupies. He is manipulating gravity. Gravity, Aizawa repeated. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. A dangerous quirk. If he loses control, he could bring this entire building down on our heads. He seems to have a drawback, Niza noted, pointing at the screen. Look! After dropping the tank, Izuku was seen leaning against the ventilation unit, clutching his head. He stayed there for 5 seconds, shaking, before slapping his cheeks and moving on. Vertigo, recovery girl diagnosed from her seat. Sensory conflict. He's rewriting the laws of physics, but his body is still subject to biology. High risk. High reward. Let's see how he handles the pressure, a figure near a red button said. The true test is not how they hunt, but how they survive. The hand pressed the button. The arena. Izuku had lost count of his points. It was somewhere over 40. That should be safe. He was currently in the industrial district of the Mach City. He was tired. The constant shifting of gravity, making himself light, making enemies heavy, deflecting debris, was taking a toll. His inner ear felt like it was filled with angry wasps. The dampers were helping, but they couldn't stop the physiological confusion of his brain. He rounded a corner and saw a two-pointer, a scorpion-like machine, crawling up a wall. Repulsion, Izuku wheezed, flicking his wrist. The robot was blasted off the wall, tumbling onto its back. Its legs flailed uselessly. Izuku walked past it. He didn't finish it off. Waste of energy. It's neutralized. Suddenly, the ground jumped. It wasn't a vibration. It was a quake. Izuku stumbled, his equilibrium already fragile. He grabbed a lamppost to steady himself. Earthquake? No. Rhythmic impact. Boom, boom. The sound was deafening. Dust clouds billowed from the central plaza, rising like a pyroclastic flow. From the dust, a shadow emerged. It was impossibly large. The zero-pointer. Izuku craned his neck back. And back. And back. The robot towered over the fake skyscrapers. Its head was lost in the smoke. Its hand was the size of a gymnasium. That's not an obstacle, Izuku whispered, his voice dry. That's a natural disaster. The robot punched a building. The structure didn't just break, it disintegrated. Concrete rained down like hail. Run! It's the zero-pointer! Get away! The street filled with screaming students. The panic was real. The sheer scale of the machine bypassed their rational brains and hit the lizard brain directly. Predator. Too big. Flee. Izuku turned to run. It was the logical choice. He had enough points. Fighting this thing yielded nothing. It was a waste of stamina. He activated his self-gravity reduction, preparing to leap away. Ah wow, my leg! The sound was small, faint, buried under the roaring of the collapsing building and the grinding of the robot's treads. But Izuku heard it. He stopped. The crowd rushed past him, bumping his shoulders. He looked back. Through the haze of dust, about 50 meters away, he saw her. The girl with the round face. Ochaco Uraraka. She was on the ground. A large slab of masonry, dislodged by the robot's rampage, had pinned her leg. She was straining against it, her fingers glowing pink, trying to float it. But she looked sick. Her face was pale green. She had reached her limit. The zero-pointer was moving forward. Its massive treads were churning up the asphalt. It was maybe 30 seconds away from rolling over her. Izuku stood frozen. His brain did the math. Distance 50 meters. Robot mass, estimated 4,000 tons. Velocity, 5 meters per second. Time to impact, 30 seconds. Can I move the rubble? Yes. Easy. Can I get her out in time? Maybe. Will the robot stop? No. Even if I move her, the debris falling from the robot's impacts will kill us both. The only way to ensure safety was to stop the threat. But the threat was a god made of steel. Izuku felt the nausea roll in his stomach. He felt the warning throb in his temples. He was at 70% capacity. A move big enough to stop that thing would push him to 120%. It would break him. He looked at Uraraka. She had stopped struggling. She was looking up at the tread descending toward her with wide, terrified eyes. A hero, All Might had said, is someone who smashes through the limits of what is possible because they cannot bear to see another suffer. Izuku dropped his backpack. He didn't run toward Uraraka. He looked up at the sky. Gravity 0. He severed his connection to the earth entirely. He kicked the ground one last time, a crack appearing in the pavement under his boot. He shot upward like a missile. The wind whipped at his face. He ascended past the first floor. The second. The 10th. Midoriya? Ida, fleeing with the others, stopped and looked back. What is he doing? That's suicide. Izuku kept rising. He flew straight toward the face of the Titan. The zero-pointer's sensors locked onto him. A red light bathed Izuku's body. To the robot, he was a mosquito. Izuku reached an altitude of 60 meters. He was level with the robot's 3 glowing eyes. He hovered there, a speck of flesh against a mountain of metal. "Hey!" Izuku screamed. The robot paused, its gears grinding. Izuku extended both arms. He spread his fingers wide, encompassing the robot's massive torso in his field of view. He closed his eyes for a microsecond. He visualized the center of the robot. He visualized the space between the atoms of the steel. He needed a point of infinite density. The drawback hit him before he even activated the quirk. His nose began to bleed, a trickle of red running over his lip. His vision tunneled. Focus. Just 1 second. Hold it for 1 second. Izuku opened his eyes. They were no longer just glowing. They were burning with white-hot violet energy. Graviton art. He slammed his hands together, interlacing his fingers, and pulled them into his chest as if dragging the entire world with him. Singularity. Physics broke. A point of supergravity, equivalent to 500 gs, manifested inside the chest cavity of the zero-pointer. The sound was unlike anything the students had ever heard. It wasn't an explosion. It was a screeching, tearing shriek of metal being tortured beyond its yield strength. The robot's chest crumpled inward. The massive steel plates folded like wet paper. The head was sucked down into the torso. The shoulders collapsed inward. The tank treads lifted off the ground, dragged violently toward the center of the anomaly. The air rushed in to fill the vacuum, creating a hurricane-force wind that knocked the fleeing students off their feet. High above, Izuku screamed. He was channeling everything. He was the anchor. The weight of the 4,000-ton robot was pressing against his mind. He felt his capillaries bursting. He felt the blood vessels in his eyes straining. The world turned red. Cruinch. The zero-pointer was no longer a robot. It was a ball. A dense, jagged, car-sized sphere of scrap metal hung in the air for a heartbeat, suspended by Izuku's will. Then, the connection snapped. Izuku's eyes rolled back into his head. The violet light vanished. The sphere dropped. Boom. It hit the street with the force of a meteor, sending a shockwave that shattered the windows of every building within a 3-block radius. Dust enveloped everything, and then silence. High in the air, a small body began to fall. Izuku was unconscious. He was tumbling, limp as a rag doll, plummeting from 60 meters. The students below watched in horror. He had stopped the god, but gravity was about to claim its price. "He's going to hit!" Someone screamed. From the dust cloud near the impact site, a figure moved. Ochaco Uraraka, freed from the rubble by the shockwave of the robot's implosion, stumbled forward. Her leg was bleeding. She was dizzy, but she looked up. She saw him falling. She didn't think about the pain. She didn't think about her own nausea. She ran. She limped, stumbled, and threw herself toward the spot where he would land. "Release!" She screamed, but she wasn't touching him yet. She jumped. She slapped his cheek just as he was 10 feet from the ground. Zero gravity. Izuku's fall stopped instantly. He froze in midair, inches above the concrete, bobbing gently like a balloon. Ochaco collapsed, falling onto her hands and knees. She retched, vomiting a rainbow of glitter, or just bile, it was hard to tell in the dust, onto the pavement. "Safe." She wheezed. Safe. The aftermath. The silence of Battle Center B was broken only by the wail of sirens. Izuku woke up to the smell of smelling salts. It was sharp and burning. Gah! He jerked upright, then immediately regretted it. The world spun violently to the left. He grabbed his head, groaning. "Easy, Sonny. Easy." A small, elderly woman in a nurse's outfit was standing over him. "Recovery girl." She kissed his forehead. A wave of warmth washed over him, chasing away the worst of the pain, but leaving him exhausted. What happened?" Izuku slurred. He looked around. He was on a stretcher. The exam was over. "You broke the robot," Recovery Girl said, her voice stern. "And you nearly broke your brain doing it." She shined a penlight into his eyes. "Pupils are responsive, but sluggish. You have a severe concussion. Not from impact, you didn't hit your head. The pressure inside your skull spiked when you used that. whatever that was. Singularity, Izuku whispered. Is the girl okay? Miss Uraraka is fine, Recovery Girl said, pointing to a nearby ambulance where Ochaco was sipping water. She has a sprained ankle and exhaustion, but she's alive. Because of you. Izuku lay back down. He felt heavy. Heavier than he had ever felt. I didn't get any points for that, he murmured, closing his eyes. I wasted the last minute. Rest, Recovery Girl commanded. Leave the points to the judges. The verdict. 1 week. 1 week of silence. 1 week of staring at the ceiling, waiting for the dizziness to fully fade. 1 week of agonizing over the math. I had maybe 45 points, Izuku thought, pacing his room. Is that enough? The average cutoff is usually around 50 or 60. I spent too much time moving debris. I spent too much time setting up efficient kills instead of just blasting everything. He looked at his notebook. He had drawn a diagram of the zero-pointer. He had calculated the force required to crush it. It was terrifying. He had tapped into something deep that day, a level of graviton he hadn't known existed. Izuku! It's here! His mother's voice shrieked from the hallway. Izuku froze. Inko Midoriya slid into his room, holding a white envelope with the Yue wax seal. She looked like she was about to faint. I didn't open it, she stammered. I was too scared. Izuku took the envelope. His hands were shaking. I'll do this alone, Mom. She nodded, tearing up, and left the room. Izuku sat at his desk. He took a deep breath. He visualized a gravity anchor in his chest. Open it. He tore the seal. A small metal disc clattered onto the desk. A hologram? BZZT. A projection sprang to life. I am here. Izuku jumped back, nearly falling out of his chair. All Might, in his full muscular glory, filled the room with light. He was wearing a yellow suit and striking a pose. As a projection, All Might? Izuku gasped. But I haven't heard from you since the exam. Young Midoriya. The hologram boomed. You have been waiting. You have been anxious. But fear not. I am here to deliver the results. All Might cleared his throat and picked up a piece of paper. First, the written exam. You scored a 98%. A brilliant display of academic prowess. But as you know, the hero course requires more than just brains. Izuku gripped his knees. The practical exam. All Might shouted. You destroyed 45 villain points worth of enemies. A respectable score. In any normal year, this would likely be enough to pass. Izuku exhaled. Likely? But... All Might leaned into the camera. The entrance exam is not just about destroying villains. How could a hero course reject someone who saves others and does the right thing? The video feed changed. It showed the control room. It showed the judges watching the screen. Then, it showed a clip of Ochaco Uraraka standing in the negotiation room after the exam. She looked disheveled, desperate. Please! She was saying to present Mike. Can you give him my points? At least some of them? He saved me. He jumped at that giant robot when everyone else ran away. He looked like he was going to die. If he fails because he saved me, that's not fair. Izuku's eyes widened. Tears pricked the corners. You have a fan. All Might said, smiling gently. She tried to negotiate for you. But there was no need. The video cut back to the zero-pointer. It showed Izuku flying upward. It showed the moment of the singularity. The sheer power. The sacrifice. This is a job that requires risking one's life to put that lip service into practice. All Might shouted. Rescue points are given by a panel of judges, and for your act of overwhelming bravery and overwhelming power, UA grants you. A massive number appeared on the screen next to his villain points. Rescue points, 60. 60? Izuku choked. Total score, 105. All Might declared. Izuku Midoriya. You passed with the highest score in the exam. You have truly ascended. The hologram reached out a hand. Come, young Midoriya. This is your hero academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the silence of his room. The tears finally fell, heavy and hot. He wasn't crying from relief. He was crying because the weight was gone. He stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. He wasn't the quirkless kid anymore. He wasn't the boy who floated. He was the one who held the sky. Class 1A, 1, Yuga Oyama, 2, Mina Ishido, 3, Tsuya Ajiri, 4, Tenya Ida, 5, Ochaco Uraraka, 6, Mashireo Ojiro, 7, Denki Kaminari, 8, Eijiro Kurishima, 9, Koji Koda, 10, Rikido Sato, 11, Mizo Shoji, 12, Kyokujiro, 13, Hanta Siro, 14, Fumikage Tokoemi, 15, Shoto Todoroki, 16, Toru Hagakure, 17, Katsuki Bakugo, 18, Izuku Midoriya, 19, Minoru Mineta, 20, Momo Yayorozu. 4 weeks later, the first day, the hallways of UA were huge. The doors were massive. Izuku stood in front of Class 1A. He smoothed his tie. He checked his earplugs, a newer, sleeker model disguised as wireless earbuds. New gravity. New rules. He opened the door. Don't put your feet on the desk. Ha! You got a problem with that, Four Eyes? The scene was familiar. Tenya Ida was scolding Katsuki Bakugo. Bakugo sat with his feet up, looking bored. But when the door opened, his red eyes snapped to Izuku. He didn't yell. He didn't explode. He took his feet off the desk. The room went quiet. Ida turned around. Ah. You are. Ida marched over. Midoriya. I must apologize. I misjudged you completely at the entrance exam. You perceived the true nature of the test while I was blinded by the surface rules. I hate to admit it, but you were the better man. Izuku waved his hands. It was just intuition, Midoriya. A bubbly voice came from behind him. Ochaco Uraraka beamed at him. You made it. That's awesome. I wanted to thank you for saving me. And wow, your punch, or crush, or whatever, was amazing. The teachers were talking about it. It was nothing, Izuku blushed. If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. A tired voice came from the floor. Everyone looked down. A man in a yellow sleeping bag was lying there like a caterpillar. Shota Aizawa. Eraserhead. He stood up, shedding the bag. He looked exhausted. He looked at the class with bloodshot eyes. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, Aizawa muttered. Time is limited. You kids are not rational enough. He reached into his bag and pulled out a gym uniform. Put these on, he said, holding it out. And meet me on the field. The field? Uraraka asked. What about orientation? The ceremony? Aizawa turned, his hair falling over his face. He looked directly at Izuku. If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for leisurely ceremonies, Aizawa said coldly. UA is known for its unrestricted style. And that applies to the teachers as well. He opened the door. We're doing a quirk apprehension test. Izuku felt a chill. A test. Immediately. Bakugo, Aizawa said. You finished second in the entrance exam. What was your softball throw record in junior high? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk. They moved to the field. The class watched as Bakugo stepped into the circle. Die! Bakugo screamed, blasting the ball. Boom! The ball flew. 705.2 meters. The class gasped. Awesome! This looks fun. Fun? Aizawa's eyes narrowed. You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's going to be fun? He smiled, a terrifying, manic expression. Right. Let's make this interesting. The student who ranks last in total score will be judged to have no potential. Aizawa looked at Izuku. He knew about the vertigo. He knew about the drawback. He saw a glass cannon, and will be expelled immediately. Izuku swallowed hard. The weight of the world was back.